Urban legends exist all around the world, often in the form of a bizarre story or an alleged entity. Some of these urban legends are more obscure than others. In America, we have our fair share of creepy stories, some of which are passed down from generation to generation. These stories often tell of an interesting entity or phenomenon, like a man-like bird figure with glowing red eyes, or a part goat, kangaroo, bat, horse thing. There's one urban legend I want to look at in particular, and unless you're from the areas where the urban legend originates, you've probably never heard of it. Not only do I want to tell the story of this urban legend, for those of you who might not know, but I also want to try to find the origin. Where did this story come from, and who or what is this creature? This is my internet investigation of the Pigman. I spent a lot of time trying to figure out if I wanted to make this a two-part video or not, considering its length, but ultimately I decided it would make more sense as one video. I feel like the final story I talk about really wraps everything up. The Pigman. As the name suggests, the Pigman is generally described as a man wearing a hollowed-out pig's head. Most stories of the Pigman actually describe it slightly differently though, some saying it is a human-like creature with a pig's face, glowing red eyes, and white hair all over its body. Others say it's a man wearing a hollowed-out pig's head, and others say it's just a man with a pig's snout. The descriptions seem to depend on where the story is told, and we'll see there are many locations across the continental US that talk about this alleged Pigman. All stories label the Pigman with the same intentions, however, to terrorize, stalk, or possibly kill any individual in its vicinity. All of these stories are actually thought to originate in the 1950s and 60s. Is this when the Pigman was conceived? We'll talk about each location's story in the order of how vague to specific the information presents itself. At the end, I'll describe the supposed original story of this entity. The Pig-Headed Spectre of Pigman's Bridge. This location of Pigman comes from Hawkinsville, Georgia. It's common with any urban legend to hear a few variations of the story, with one tending to be the most agreed upon one. One variation of Hawkinsville Pigman is almost identical to the last story on this list, which is said to be the place of the original Pigman tale. The second story is something much more unique though. Sometime in the late 1950s, a traveling circus man was known throughout many US states for his amazing ability to train pigs. The man was said to be extraordinary, yet very antisocial, his only friends being his pigs. He trained them to do all sorts of tricks and commands. Many say he never treated his beloved pigs well, however, yelling at them and even sometimes getting physical. The story says that the man either grew old and settled in the area of Hawkinsville, Georgia, or was just passing through the area. One day while out in the field, his pigs went mad, brutally killing the man. It's said his ghost now lingers in the area, haunting a bridge near the place of his death. Many claim to see the circus man appearing as a pig-headed specter. Urban legend says that if you visit the Pigman Bridge at night, you can see the glowing specter for yourself. Be careful though, if you get too close, many say he will chase after you. It's an interesting story, and surely one I've never heard before. I tried finding if this man actually existed, but only found that several different circuses have passed through the area in the early 1900s, many of them having animal trainers, though they did not describe any pig trainers. Further, no news articles in the 1900s in Hawkinsville tell of any man murdered by pigs. Did a variation of this event actually happen, or was it conjured up by someone? Nonetheless, it is an interesting story that has been told for many years. I believe it's likely that there was an origin to the story, though a man turning into a pig-headed specter, I don't know. If anyone lives in this area, I'd love to hear any more information or background on the story because there's virtually none that exists on the internet. The Hog Valley Pigman. This story takes place in West Denton, starting in the early 1950s. There's a location in West Denton, rural farmland with few bridges and creeks nearby. One source claims these bridges are the Bonnie Bray Bridges, though I can find no other confirmation on that. The rural farmland in the story was eventually labeled Hog Valley for its eerie reportings. In the 1950s and 60s, this was a popular makeout spot for teens and partygoers. Teens would drive out to the secluded area and park their cars under the moonlight. Suddenly though, large amounts of teens started reporting a grotesquely deformed-looking pigman in the area, a human-like creature with a deformed face and bright glowing red eyes. Teenagers report the creature to throw rocks from the creek bed at their cars. Apparently enough teenagers reported these encounters that local authorities relayed this message to a local newspaper. The newspaper released an article warning teenagers and adults to stay away from the area. Despite this, however, rebel kids still ventured out into the area, likely to experience the attraction for themselves. From here, more and more stories circulated of the grunting pigman that crawled in the creek beds, hurling rocks in the dark. Some even claim the creature travels with packs of aggressive wild boars native to the rural farmlands. Reports eventually started to fizzle out, but the story of the Hog Valley Pigman is still told in West Denton today. There are several explanations for the origin of the creekbed pigman, some more popular than others. Popular explanations say that it was a story made by parents to deter teens from getting freaky out in the rural farmlands. It seems reasonable, but it doesn't account for all the reportings, even from adults simply passing through the area. Did this eventually lead to mass hysteria? Others say it was a group of teenagers playing pranks on their classmates. Some people have gone to more creative explanations, however, like a story of a drifter that was bitten by a wild boar while traveling through the area. This boar was said to be cursed or diseased, transforming the drifter into the Pigman, where it was bound to roam the creek beds of Hog Valley forever. Now, I'm not sure about a blighted boar, but one source claims the real origin to West Denton's Pigman. Sometime in the late 1960s and 1970s, a gang existed called the Cowboy Mafia. This was a real gang which consisted of marijuana smugglers said to frequent remote areas of the Hog Valley. One member of the gang, whose identity remains unknown, was discovered to be squealing on other gang members, telling police about their operations. When the gang found out, they took matters into their own hands. They cut off the snitch's nose and gave him something called a Chelsea grin. This is when 2 to 3 inch incisions are made on each corner of a person's mouth, slicing slowly towards their ears. The aftermath leaves the victim with what appears to be a giant, disturbing smile. The ex-gang member apparently survived, but was unable to function in a normal society. This led the alleged outcast to roam the countryside, often taking refuge under bridges and barns. This seems to be the most popular explanation, though I can find no official confirmation on its validity. If this explanation claims to have happened in the 1970s, which is in fact when the Cowboy Mafia was in operation, how does it explain the reportings of the creature nearly 20 years prior? If this was just a story meant to scare teenagers, why did so many adults end up encountering the creature as well? I'd also be very interested to know how teens could pull off this prank for so many years without being discovered, as one explanation suggests. What do you think? Was this Pigman just a story to scare horny teenagers? Was it a long prank done by clever classmates? Or was it something much more disturbing? We don't know. If you have any information or stories about West Denton's Pigman, please tell me below in the comments. The Tennessee Pigman. Like the other locations, the Tennessee Pigman follows a few stories solely based around the final entry in this list. One story, however, sticks out and is a bit more unfortunate. The story goes that in the 1940s, an unidentified man was working at a local explosives plant near Millington, Tennessee. This was one of many ordnance plants operational in America during the World War II era, but we'll get back to that. Rumors claim that an explosive accident happened one day at the plant, leaving the unidentified man's face horribly disfigured. Once he went back to work, co-workers started referring to him as the Pigman. His co-workers soon ostracized the man, followed by the community that he lived in. Some say he just disappeared after that, while others claim he moved into the nearby Me-Man-Shelby forest to live out the rest of his days. In the following decades, many alleged reports of a quote-unquote Pigman terrorizing people at night started circulating around the area. Some reports claim to have apparently been terrorized by the outcasted man they once worked with. Others claim to see a man with a real pig's head over his own. The story doesn't say exactly what the Pigman does besides terrorize people. Today, rumor has it that if you're lucky, or unlucky, you can find the Pigman randomly roaming around the Me-Man-Shelby forest, with better chances of seeing him at night. For the more adventurous, it's said you can summon the Pigman at a bridge located in Germantown, Tennessee, near the Me-Man-Shelby State Park. The urban legend goes that you must first park your car on the middle of the bridge at midnight and shut your engine off. From here you must flash your headlights 3 times while saying, "Pigman, Pigman, Pigman," at each flash. The Pigman is said to appear at the end of the bridge in front of your car. Now, I know what you're thinking. That's probably just a campfire story and a half, and I'm inclined to agree with you, but the man with the disfigured face in the beginning of the story could have been a real person. I found through research that the explosives plant referred to in the story likely would have been the Chickasaw Ordnance Works. The Chickasaw Ordnance Works, formerly called Tennessee Powder Works, was in operation from 1940 through 1946. The plant was responsible for making various munitions for the Allied war effort at the time, particularly gun cotton for ammunition and TNT. The only problem is that the Chickasaw Ordnance Works was statistically the safest ordnance plants at the time, having less than half of the amount of accidents as other plants operating during the period. The plant set a safety world record for operating 2 million, eventually going up to 3.6 million work hours without a major injury. Further, Chickasaw Ordnance Works received the first E Award of the Southwest, given only to plants with near-perfect production safety efforts. All of this together, it seems unlikely that the unnamed man in the Pigman story had an accident while working at the plant, severely disfiguring his face. I speculate that this could have been a minor unreported case, though I doubt it considering the description of the man's appearance. My other thought is that this was a pre-existing condition on the man, with rumors claiming it happened at work. We just don't know. Did this man exist? Was he exiled into the forest to live out his days? Do some people see a different Pigman? What are your thoughts? The Pigmen of Devil's Washbowl. This next story takes place in Northfield, Vermont. On the night of October 30th, 1951, teenager Sam Harris went missing in the hills of Northfield. Reports claim he was going out for a picket night, what locals refer to as the Night of Mischief before Halloween. Sam's parents awoke the next morning to find him nowhere to be found. They panicked, immediately contacting authorities about their son's supposed disappearance. Apparently, in the following days, huge search parties scoured the area of Northfield, but did not find Sam. Some time goes by, and Sam is thought to be seen again, but this time, he wasn't quite himself. Alleged reports say townsfolk saw a naked man with white fur all over his body, running around with a pig's head and snout. The creature was said to terrorize anyone in his path. But was this Sam? How could this be Sam Harris? From here, the rumors are mixed, with some saying Sam was previously known for slaughtering pigs, eating their entrails, and wearing parts of their bodies as accessories. Others say Sam's pig slaughter was a ritual on picket night to sell his soul to the devil, witnessed by few people. Regardless, a popular sighting of Sam, aka the Pigman, tells of a group of teenagers who snuck out of their high school dance to drink at the sandpits near the Northfield school. While enjoying their night, the teens claimed a creature with white fur all over its body came running out of the woods towards them. They described the thing as a man-like creature with a pig's face. They were able to escape back to the dance, where they told their classmates, but no one believed them. After this event, Pigman sightings seemingly skyrocketed. Another alleged case from 1971 explains a farmer's encounter with the creature. The farmer, who lived on the outskirts of Northfield, heard noises coming from his backyard one night. Thinking it was an animal, he turned on the outdoor light and looked out the window to investigate. He was shocked when he saw a man-sized figure covered in all white fur with the facial features of a pig. The creature eventually scurried into the woods. It's not over for the Pigman of Northfield, however. Fast forward about 20 years, rumors of the Pigman are now circulating around a nearby nature attraction, Devil's Washbowl. Reports claim individuals finding animal bones, some of which are pig bones, in the caves near the washbowl. Others claim strange, hooved footprints can also be seen in the area. Coincidentally, teenagers in the 90s would frequent the Devil's Washbowl, using it for partying and makeout spots. Some supposed reports from teens say they would get terrorized by the Pigman himself. The Pigman would frequent the nearby caves, making loud grunting noises and bangs. As he got close to the teenagers' cars, teens would know a horrible smell, followed by rocks thrown towards their location. The rumors continued that this was Sam Harris, who has now found a home at the Devil's Washbowl. Legend says he now breeds with local pigs to spawn more half-pig, half-man demonic offspring. Now, I don't know about that, but if you want to see the Pigman of Devil's Washbowl, locals say your best chance is to go after dark. Pigman Road. This next story takes place in Angola, New York, a place where I happen to live nearby. I'll refer to it as Pigman's Bridge because locally that's what we've always called it. Yes, another bridge is involved. This story is the one that so many other locations have variations of, this one however being the original, and we'll get to why. It goes that a butcher used to live in a secluded house on Holland Road in Angola, New York. This very private and mysterious man would put stakes with animal heads on them all around his property. Many of the animals said to be pigs. This was to ward off anyone looking to communicate with the man. One night, 3 teenage boys took it upon themselves to venture onto the butcher's land. It's said the butcher quickly caught the boys and tied them up in his shack. He slowly began to behead and butcher each teen, making sure the others watched to see what was next for them. After the slaughtering, the Pigman put the boys' heads on 3 stakes near his driveway entrance. Some claim he then hung their headless bodies from the railroad bridge just down the road from his property. No one knows exactly of the butcher's fate after this. Some say he was found by the townsfolks and executed for his crime. Others say he simply vanished. Regardless, tons of personal accounts claim the butcher still lives in the woods, preying, stalking, and harassing those who venture too far in. Many reports say they can see the man with the pig's head over his own. This story has been circulating for many decades, intriguing locals and visitors alike. In 2019, the Travel Channel series Hometown Horror premiered their first episode, which featured an overnight investigation at Pigman's Bridge on Holland Road. Not only is this area intriguing for its Pigman rumors, it's also had a very tragic past. If one were to travel to Pigman's Bridge today, you'd find a very dangerous one-lane road under a couple of slowly degrading bridges. Near the road, you'll see a plaque describing an event that shocked the entire country at the time. An event named the Angola Horror. This real event was one of the worst train derailing accidents in American history, killing an estimated 49 people. Interestingly, however, this tragic event may be more related to the Pigman than what's on the surface. The Angola train wreck occurred on December 18, 1967 at 3:11 p.m. It started with the New York Express train leaving a station in Cleveland, Ohio early on December 18th. This train was bound for Buffalo, New York, taking the Lakeshore Railway track. On this train were an array of people ranging from plain travelers to medical doctors. One of the most notable people to be on the train was John D. Rockefeller, a very wealthy and influential American at the time. Rockefeller's journey was cut short, however, as he arrived to the train station minutes after the train's departure. A fortunate disruption he would later be grateful for. His luggage was even already packed and loaded on the train. The train itself consisted of 4 baggage cars, 1 second-class car, and 3 first-class carriages. The cars themselves were compromise cars, meaning that they could run on tracks with both standard and Ohio-sized gauges, the difference of gauges being 1.5 inches. It's noted that this led to lateral movement on the higher gauge, the Ohio gauge, which created instability along the trip. From Ohio to Buffalo was supposed to be a 7-hour trip, but with weather conditions and stops, the train was 3 hours late when passing Angola. It's reported that at 3:11 p.m. on December 18, 1967, the New York Express, while nearing a truss bridge, hit a railroad frog being the crossing point of 2 railroad tracks. It was determined that the front axle of the rearmost car was already slightly bent, and running over the frog caused the wheel to jump off the track, derailing it. When crew figured out this happened, the brakes were applied, but since the train was still traveling at high speeds, it caused the car to sway from side to side. Passengers began trying to make their way to other train cars, but this was difficult. The swaying motions of the last car began to pull heavily on the train, which eventually led to the second-to-last car derailing as well. The train was coming up to a bridge, which crosses the Big Sister Creek. At the base of the bridge, the last car finally had enough. It uncoupled from the train, flying over the edge of an icy embankment. Meanwhile, the second car was just barely holding on. It managed to cross the bridge with the other cars before sliding down the opposite embankment, just as the first train did. The second car slid 30 feet down the icy hill. Passengers in the train were slammed around like rag dolls, getting severely injured from the impact. Only 1 person in the second car passed away. The rearmost car would have a much more terrible fate. Not only did the first car carry around 50 passengers and various items, it housed a few coal-burning stoves. While sliding 40 feet down the embankment, passengers in the car were thrown to one side on top of a stove. Nearing the end of the crash, the stove from the opposite side fell onto the passengers, releasing hot coals onto all of them. To make matters worse, at the time the main lighting source on the trains were kerosene lamps. When the coals were released from the stove, the cars almost instantly caught on fire. This happened so quickly, passengers had little to no time to react. A reported 2 people escaped from this now fiery car. 40+ passengers were piled up on top of each other, stuck like glue, and slowly suffocating from lack of air. Flames started to slowly devour their bodies. Survivors and nearby villagers ran to the wreck, trying to rescue anyone they could find in the inferno. Reports say that all you could smell is flesh burning in the air and the sound of screams of dying people, which quickly faded into the flames. The screams of the dying lingered for about 5 minutes before it went to an eerie silence. As the crash settled, many officials and medical professionals arrived at the scene, trying to recover any remains they could. Accounts of the aftermath just describe lumps of charred flesh being recovered, hardly resembling a human at all. An estimated 49 people died that day. This quickly became a nationwide story, which led to calls for safer railway travel. So, what does this have to do with the Pigman? We'll get to that. In the meantime, what if I were to tell you that the cause of the Angola horror could have been a cover-up? An action that lingers with a certain family, perhaps cursing them for decades to come. The following section of this video is going to talk about one document I came across while researching for the video. This document borders the line of reality and fiction, and after reading it, I really don't know what to believe. I encourage you all to read this document as it's very fascinating and goes over many true stories occurring in this small western New York town. Links will be in the description. I will talk about the validity of this document at the end of the video and then my thoughts on it. This document strongly suggests the origin of the Angola Pigman. The compiler, who goes by the name of MC Pigmen, accumulated this information and created the document. I do not know how MC Pigmen created this though, for I cannot find a lot of its information online. Perhaps Pigmen spent a great deal of time in Angola doing extensive research and interviewing locals. I cannot get into contact with this individual, and I don't even know if this is their actual name. The only email on the document's website is inactive. Moving on to the document itself, and the origin of the Pigman. It's best for me to go over most of the document so you can get the whole story. It starts off describing Angola's history as a town and its early development towards a thriving community. It quickly transitions into the in-depth story of the Angola horror, referring to people that were actually on the train and real news articles associated with the disaster. The only difference between this information and other information you'll find online, besides it being so in-depth, is that the disaster was actually caused by 2 teenage boys. Pigmen made it very clear not to blame the family or anyone else involved, and I am going to say the same thing. Further, I will refer to this family as the D family, as I do not want to use their actual name, assuming they exist. Anyway, in 1967, a man named Eli and his 2 teenage sons, Loring and Henry, live in a house just south of Angola, near newly laid railroad tracks. To help supplement the income of the family, Loring and Henry would often walk the railroad tracks, picking up stray coal from traveling train cars. One day, while walking the tracks, the boys decided to take a few railroad ties from the track, as they had a broken fence at home and thought the ties would be the perfect fix. Railroad ties are the wood or steel beams you commonly see in the middle of the tracks. This action by Loring and Henry is said to be the true cause of the Angola horror. The accident was said to be covered up, as few people aside from the boys knew what they did. Perhaps this was to avoid negative press on the town, or to keep the family safe. We don't know. It's recorded that after the devastating accident, part of the track was damaged, which railroad officials cited the train's heavy friction as its cause. Was this damaged part of the track the act of Loring and Henry? Could it be that if the track wasn't damaged, the accident could have been averted? I speculate that with lack of railroad ties, the cold weather could have shifted the track slightly. This, in combination with the already slightly bent front axle of the rear car, could have caused the entire derailing. We don't know for sure, however. Not much is known about the boys right after the event. Years later, verbal reports from townsfolk say they noticed a framed Buffalo newspaper article summarizing the Angola horror hanging in the D's family parlor. This seems odd considering the alleged involvement of the boys. Was this hung as a sad reminder to pay tribute to the victims, or was it hanging for something much more sinister? Loring and Henry stay out of Angola's limelight until 1904, when a horrible fire on Commercial Street destroys various buildings and businesses. Apparently, the fire had a very suspicious origin, and many people accused Henry of starting it. This led to constant harassment towards Henry before he finally had enough. It's said Henry packed up his things and fled the state, some claiming he went to Texas, while others say Alaska. With Henry gone, the natural blame shifted towards Loring and his now wife, Betsy. Loring and Betsy tried to make a good name for themselves in the community, but were largely turned away by everyone. The document claims this is why you won't find the D family on any town's documents. Through my own personal research, I can indeed confirm you do not find the family name in any online document. Again, years go by and the D family, now thought to be just Loring and Betsy in town, largely stick to themselves. In 1911, however, Loring tries to be accepted by his community by lighting the annual 4th of July fireworks. The display is cut short when a stray spark prematurely ignites the fireworks display. This resulted in townsfolk receiving minor injuries and burned clothes. The worst of all, though, a rocket from the display pierced the arm of a young boy, costing the village $11,500. This event apparently caused Loring to fall into major depression, rarely leaving his house located on Holland Road. On April 17, 1913, Loring and Betsy have their first and allegedly only child, William. The delivery went great, especially with the help of Mrs. McMahon, an elderly nanny and apparently one of Dee's family's only friends. Shock came, however, when William's face was revealed to Betsy and Loring, showing William having great facial deformities. Particularly, his nose was split down the middle and he had a rather large cleft lip. This gave him a pig-like appearance, as quoted from the document, right from his birth. Hageman suggests this is because of Betsy's inbred past, or possibly God's retribution for Loring. It's unclear why, but not long after William's birth, Mrs. McMahon abandoned the Dees' friendship, writing she would never assist the family again. Miss Mann then allegedly wrote letters to every and any medical professional, proclaiming William to be taken away from the Dees. This made life very difficult for the family over the next few years. 5 years later, and disaster strikes again. While rounding Main Street and Commercial Street, 2 trolley freight cars struck into the Angola Village Hall and Newbeck building. Mrs. McMahon, who lived in the Newbeck building, got rolled out of bed into some rubble of the wreckage. She survived the crash with minor wounds. The buildings were severely damaged, however. Reports say the failure of air brakes was the cause of the event. Coincidentally, Loring was allegedly seen on the tracks the night prior. The D family again became full-blown outcasts. Was this Loring's attempt for revenge towards Mrs. McMahon? A year later, in 1919, another train accident almost occurred, this time involving a small child. A well-known one-armed boxer and railroad gateman from the community, Theodore Miller, was in town at the time. His day took a turn when he saw a 6-year-old boy out on the train tracks as a train was approaching. He quickly dashed on the tracks, grabbing the boy and dragging him to safety moments before the train would have struck the kid dead. This is a real event that happened, but in the newspaper article, the boy's identity was never revealed, odd for such a small village. The Pigman document reveals that this was none other than William D., the son of Loring. It was here that Theodore Miller and William apparently became good friends. We now fast forward to the 1930s. William, who was living on Holland Road, befriended a nearby butcher and worked as his assistant. The document suggests this is why the legend labels the Pigman as a butcher, though William himself never really cut meat. Not too long after, Theodore introduced William to a side gig, being a sideshow act in P.T. Barnum and Ripley's traveling shows. Here, William would travel with other odd individuals, part of a quote-unquote freak show. This was a seasonal job, so William would alternate between the traveling circus and working at a landfill adjacent to his house on Holland Road. The landfill company, Ed Ball Sanitation, hired William as a night watchman and morning gatekeeper. In the 1940s, at around age 34 or 35, William marries his cousin, Mildred C. He continues his life as a traveling oddity and an off-season watchguard well into the 1950s. Here, it's said William and his wife now have a reputation for being compulsive hoarders. William would acquire many items from his different jobs, usually just junk or bizarre items, and place them all around his property. Very true to the legend, William would put pig, goat, cow, sheep, and other animals' heads on sticks all around his property. This was apparently to protect his valuable stuff. It's clear William had some sort of hoarding disorder, using outlandish methods to protect his belongings. Many people who were allegedly interviewed for the document remember William always wearing a hood at the junkyard, likely to cover his face. William would also talk with marbles in his mouth. At the junkyard, it said William would always rush away people after they dumped their junk. This was so he could quickly find the valuables they left behind. In 1962, Mildred gave birth to her son, William Jr. Sometime later, she also had twin daughters, but birth certificates were never found for them. Mildred passed away in 1966, where she was allegedly buried on the family land on Holland Road. Townsfolk claim the twin daughters went to live in Pennsylvania, and William Jr. went to go live at a local basilica. It's unclear why the children did not live with William, but I speculate it's because of the presumably bad living conditions caused by William's hoarding. In the late 1960s, most locals now refer to Holland Road as Pigman Road, and this is likely where the urban legend started, though it's possible it could have been prior. In the early 1970s, the Edball sanitation dump closed down, and the paving of Holland Road was in very bad condition. This made travel infrequent on the road for quite some time. Its quietness and secluded area made this road a perfect spot for partygoers, however. At this time, it was also known as a makeout spot for teens. Go figure. Here, stories started arising of a monster, or quote-unquote Pigman, that would walk up to partygoers and try to make them leave. It's said the Pigman, which we can safely assume was William, would bang on cars and circle around people. Apparently no reports of damage or violent incidences were documented though. From the reports that did make it to authorities, the police questioned William. Police actually questioned William multiple times, which they told him to contact authorities and not engage in any harassment. They figured he was behind the reports. In 1972, two teenagers reported being lost on Holland Road, parked on the shoulder in their car. They say while looking at a map, smoke and flames suddenly surrounded their vehicle. The teens quickly drove away, making their way to the tunnel they needed to pass in order to leave. While approaching the tunnel, they saw a black truck with no license plates that was blocking it. With no other choice, the teens turned around and went in the other direction. The black truck began following them, chasing the car with its headlights blaring. Once the teens passed under the other bridge on the road, the truck stopped following them. After this event, police went to the area but did not find any sign of the truck. Police did see scorching grass and gravel on the side of the road, but it looked to be more like an old campfire of sorts. The officers went to William's home to question him, but no one answered the door. Later this year, the first missing persons report of the area was documented. Harris Tompkin, a utility company surveyor, went missing while going door to door on Route 5 near Holland Road. To my knowledge, he was never found after his disappearance. Investigators eventually went to William's house to question him, but instead found multiple unidentified people and animals living in there. The house itself was littered with old newspapers, feces, and just overall junk. Police also found an unidentified boy living there, which they speculated to be William Jr. William himself was not seen during the police visit. Apparently, sometime in 1972, William, aka the Pigman, was never seen again. On Halloween 1973, a fire broke out at the D's house. The house burned down to its foundation, and no bodies were ever found. The origin of the fire was never determined either. The document states that even after this fire, Pigman sightings still occurred up and down the road though. Over the next 5 years, many townsfolk reported seeing odd individuals around Holland Road. Reports of gypsies and vagabonds camping in the woods were a very common sighting at the time. Makeshift huts, graffiti, and weird piles of trash that would appear and then seemingly disappear were also commonly reported. Sickening of all, some people say they seen mutilated animal carcasses hanging from various trees in the woods, and even from the 2 bridges on the road. In Angola, shopkeepers say groups of people would just arrive and begin shoplifting, then just disappear. They say many locals avoided this area at the time. On Halloween 1978, the only other house on Holland Road burned down, exactly 5 years after Williams did. The owner was on vacation and had no clue of the event until he returned. Upon returning, the owner found his items scattered all around remote areas, usually in small, odd piles. In the 1980s, Angola repaved Holland Road, where it was more easily accessible and remains that way today. Today, there are even some houses on Holland Road, and while visiting myself, I've seen quite a bit of cars driving up and down the road. Now, I want to quickly share my experience with Holland Road. In college, I went to Pigman's Bridge with 3 friends of mine. We arrived around 10 p.m. in near pitch black conditions. While 2 of my buddies stayed in the car, my friend and I decided to go into the center of the tunnel and attempt to talk to any lingering spirits, as they are said to be in the area. 5 minutes in, while waiting for a response to a question, my friend and I both hear an old man softly and faintly chuckle. We both turned our heads at each other and quickly walked out. This is the first time I can remember ever hearing anything quote-unquote paranormal. This trip was actually the second time we've been to the bridge, the first time we've experienced nothing though. Like I said, I've recently went during the day as well, and I've also experienced nothing, but you definitely get a feeling that you're being watched. I wouldn't recommend visiting Holland Road though, but if you ever do, be extremely careful. The 1-lane tunnels can be dangerous for both cars and people. Anyway, that is the story of the document. Before we wrap up this video, I want to talk about my thoughts of the authenticity of the Pigmen document. You'll notice, if you read the document, that there are no sources or references anywhere in the paper. Going to the website where this PDF was uploaded, you'll also find no references related to the document. The only email address I could find on the website apparently didn't exist anymore, leading to an address not found response. I tried looking for an MC Hageman and found one potential match, but I could not get into contact with him. After no luck finding its creator, I started cross-referencing many events and names in the document. This led me to the Evans Historical Society archives, Evans being the town next to Angola. Their online database has hundreds of old newspaper articles from the 18 and 1900s. I found many names and events to be real from the PDF, which I wasn't totally surprised with how well this document was written. One thing I could not find though is any reporting for the fire on Commercial Street in 1904. Does this archive not have the article associated with the disaster? That seems like the most likely case, considering something like this would have definitely been reported on. Did this event just never happen though, fabricated for the story? Surprisingly, or unsurprisingly, another thing I could not find anywhere in the archives, or online at all, are records of the D family. This made me very skeptical, as you'd think there'd be something, anything about a family member. I checked for birth records, death records, property records, employment records, and nothing. There are just no records of this family online. Now, Hageman does state a few times throughout the document that you wouldn't find records of D family because their status as outcast. It really makes me wonder where Hageman got his information from then, and how much of it might be fabricated. I've also tried emailing the Historical Society, but I've still yet to get a response. I thought about visiting the Historical Society myself and questioning some local historians, but they are only open one Sunday per month, which doesn't work for my current schedule. My next thought is that maybe Hageman was using a different last name to hide the identity of the family. Seems plausible. I've checked various different last names from the archives, those who I thought would match up with the timeline, and nothing. Again, I tried searching for details of places and people who might have been involved with the D family, and this is when I made an interesting discovery. The document mentions William worked with P.T. Barnum and Ripley's traveling shows. While looking through P.T. Barnum's acts, I found a gentleman by the name of William Bill Dirks. Bill was born in Alabama only 4 days before William and has an appearance virtually identical to how the document describes William, the split nose and the cleft lip. Bill was also raised as a reject, generally kept away from the public eye. In his 40s, Bill became a sideshow performer named the Three-Eyed Man, though he didn't actually have 3 eyes, the third one was just painted on. Even more coincidental though, while on the road, Bill ended up marrying a woman named Mildred, the alligator-skinned woman. Mildred passed away in 1968, 2 years after William's Mildred passed away. Bill Dirks himself passed away in 1975, around the same time when William was quote-unquote last seen. After finding this information, I really don't know what to think about the validity of the document. On one hand, it's so well written with so much factual information in it, and on the other hand, Bill Dirks almost seems like he was just copy and pasted into the story. If this document is fake, it is by far one of the most elaborate and downright captivating semi-pseudo history pieces I have ever read. But if it's real, it's downright the most coincidental and incredible and most underrated urban legend origin stories out there. It really makes you wonder about the origin of other urban legends and how many of the other Pigmen had curious pasts. Hello, this is Future MT Caveat. After I recorded this whole script and finished editing about half of the video, I ended up getting into contact with an individual that was on the episode of Hometown Horror I previously mentioned. I thought this meant I could finally figure out who the compiler was and get some confirmation to its validity. Unfortunately, while he was very kind to answer my questions, it did not shed much light on the accuracy of the story. He also was not the compiler. The individual did mention the compiler has gone off the radar since the show's airing and will not reach out to anyone regarding the document. Further, the compiler is said to be very secluded. Interesting. I've also learned that some locals claim the Derricks never even existed at all. Yes, the D family I refer to is the Derricks. I didn't mention their name for certain legal reasons, which I know I'm now clear of. Some of the locals who know of the document believe parts of it may be fabricated as well. That being said, many do believe the document to be mostly true and condemn Old townsfolks for harshly outcasting the Derricks. The most interesting part of this conversation, though, is the picture of William Derricks I was shown. This was in fact a picture of Bill Dirks. That's it, right? Case closed. I'm not sure. The individual I reached out to said it could have been a possible stage name, which I suggested earlier. The compiler actually outright states he altered some of the names and dates to protect identities, something I overlooked previously. So is it possible Bill Dirks was really William Derricks, or vice versa? Maybe because of William's family past he changed his identity. Interestingly, the email address on the PDF's website spells Derricks differently, the only location I could find this spelling. I don't want to give my input too much because I want you to decide for yourself. However, what gets me is the fact that we have documentation of Will Dirks' birth in Alabama and his death record in Florida. I even found a snippet of it online. I'll leave it at that, and again, I'll let you decide what to think. Back to past me. What do you think about the document? Is it real? Is it fake? What are your thoughts about the other Pigmen stories? Are the Pigmen something completely different, making their way around America? I'd love to hear your thoughts and conversations in the comments. And finally, as always, thank you so much for watching this entire video. If you liked this video and want to see more content like this, check out my previous videos and subscribe to the channel. If you have any other suggestions for content, leave me a comment or email me at mt.caveat@gmail.com. Have a great day, guys, happy Halloween, and stay safe from the Pigman.